Okay, everyone, we'll make a start. Distinguished guests, state and federal government officials, space industry leaders, entrepreneurs, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this exclusive webinar on Australia's space ecosystem, Building Australia-India Collaboration. My name is Michael Costa and I'm the Deputy Consul General based at the Australian Consulate General here in Chennai. I'll be the moderator for today's session. Australia has a dynamic space sector that's growing strongly and outperforming our economy, or many other sectors of our economy. This session brings together representatives from government, industry and academia to provide an overview of Australia's space ecosystem, our national capabilities and international engagement priorities. This will really highlight the role that Australia can play as a trusted and innovative partner in space. Before we start, just a few house rules. Please keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking. In case you're facing any network or bandwidth issues, please switch off your video, and if it persists, consider signing out and then back in again. If we drop out, please stay on the line and we'll get back as soon as possible. We've received questions from many of the attendees and participants, over 100. We're going to use them to shape the remarks that panellists are providing, and we'll get to the others in the Q&A session. You'll also notice that the chat function is live, so please provide your questions throughout, and we'll get to them if there's time. A reminder that the session is being recorded and will be made available to panellists and participants after the session. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker to provide opening remarks. Mr O'Farrell has been Australia's High Commissioner to India since February 2020. He previously served in the Parliament of New South Wales from 1995 to 2015, including as the state's 43rd Premier from 2011 to 2014. As Premier, Mr O'Farrell initiated and led annual trade missions to India to promote economic, cultural and social links between New South Wales and Indian states. He has also served as New South Wales Special Envoy for India and has made significant contributions as Deputy Chair of the Australia-India Council Board. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to Australia's High Commissioner to India, the Honourable Mr Barry O'Farrell, AO.
Thank you, Michael, and good day to everybody. And I want to extend a warm welcome to all panellists and participants in today's session. I offer special thanks to CEOs from Australia's leading space firms and officials from the Australian Space Agency, Austrade, and the Australian Consulate General in Chennai for bringing together this high-profile panel. Thanks also to the Confederation for Indian Industry, the Indian Space Research Organisation and Antrix Corporation Limited for supporting this country session as part of the 25-day International Space Conference and Exhibition. I'm delighted that the New Space India Limited Chairman and Managing Director, Mr Narayan, is with us here today. And on the back of years of closer strategic congruence, deeper people-to-people ties, and vital economic integration, this event comes at a time when the Australia-India relationship is at an all-time high. It builds on the momentum created by Australia's Trade Investment Minister's visit to ISRO headquarters in February and our Prime Minister's virtual summit in June, where they agreed to elevate our relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership. Enhancing science, technology and research collaboration is a key tenet of this partnership and a priority for Australia's economic strategy for India, which includes pursuing two-way exchanges in expertise, technology and investment across the space sector. Few sectors capture the imagination like space. As science fiction becomes reality, no area offers more opportunity nor creates more challenges for our modern society. It truly is a new frontier for industry, research, employment and economic development. The global sector is growing rapidly, worth around $350 billion today and projected to grow, of course, to $1 trillion by 2040. And space-based technology and services, of course, underpin much of our modern lives. Now, Australia has a long and proud history in space, and as an economic, scientific and research collaborator with global space leaders, including India. For 50 years, Australia has been the ears of space, as part of NASA's global space infrastructure, where we received and relayed via TV worldwide the pictures of Armstrong's first steps on the moon, and subsequently facilitated communication with NASA's deep space probes and those rovers on Mars. Australia and India have been partnering since 1987, when we first inked our first MOU for space cooperation. And while we have a strong foundation for engagement with ISRO to support data calibration and laser ranging for Indian satellite systems, and have previously launched an Australian satellite from ISRO facilities, there is so much more we could do together. Australia has many unique advantages, from our geographical position in the Southern Hemisphere, our wide open spaces and relative low light pollution, through to our expertise in satellite data applications. This makes us an ideal partner for space debris tracking and space management activities, world-leading Earth observation services, efficient rocket technology and launch services, and remote asset management. Not to mention the emerging opportunities in space medicine, synthetic biology, quantum communication, in-orbit servicing, and optical wireless communication technology. So while COVID lockdowns may have delayed launches, disrupted supply chains, and limited access to finance globally, Australia and India are already adapting to the new normal and actively exploring international collaboration opportunities. Last week, we were pleased to hear more detail about India's game-changing reforms to privatise the space sector, including the establishment of the Indian National Space Promotion and Authorisation Centre. This has the potential to significantly improve the ease of doing business across the space sector and presents opportunities for collaboration on end-to-end space missions. And we continue to be impressed by India's capability and ambition to harness space technology for research and planetary exploration. I especially look forward to the Gaganyaan, India's first crewed spaceflight mission, which hopefully will take place when I'm here and hopefully outside of Delhi. So today, building on the insights from the conference last week, you'll hear from the Australian Space Agency, Austrade, the Australian Government's investment wing, South Australian Space Industry Centre, and space companies active across different Australian space states. They'll also help you to understand Australia's space ecosystem, our national capabilities, the scope for industry collaboration, and importantly, particularly at this time, why Australia is a trusted and innovative partner in space. I look forward to this session, hearing from the experts and industry leaders on the panel and identifying ways in which we can partner together to promote the peaceful use of outer space to achieve a prosperous and secure future for both our nations, our Indo-Pacific region and beyond. And finally, I urge you to approach these discussions sharing our Prime Minister's high ambitions and goals for this sector, and to go boldly where no others have gone before. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, High Commissioner. You've certainly set the scene for this session, so very much appreciate that. I would now like to welcome our next speaker to provide an Indian perspective on the future of Australia-India space cooperation. Mr. Narayanan has been a career ISRO scientist and he's been heading New Space India Limited since February this year. He's currently playing a key role in redefining how New Space India Limited will meet its enhanced mandate under the new reforms announced in June. Over his career, he has established manufacturing facilities and developed aerospace manufacturing technologies. He has previously served as the First Secretary and ISRO Technical Liaison Officer at the Indian Embassy in Paris. He's headed cryogenic engines hardware realisation activities and most recently led ISRO's systems reliability and quality assurance activities. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to welcome Chairman and Managing Director of New Space India Limited, Mr. Narayanan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Costa. Your Excellency, the Honourable Barry O'Farrell, my co-panelists, delegates, CII, ISRO and Antrix officials and others joining us this morning. It's indeed an excellent initiative by CII and Australian High Commission to come together to this platform to discuss ways of joint working in the fast emerging new space ecosystem. For Australia, this may not have come at a more appropriate time when they are celebrating the successful launch of an Australian payload from Australian soil by an Australian launch company. More noteworthy is the second consecutive successful launch achieved within a gap of less than 2 hours. I congratulate all those who were engaged in this feat. I quote from the CEO of the company, quote, "This event is more than just Australia's first launch, but a testament to Australian companies coming together with our international partners to push the boundaries of the conceivable and inspire future generations to be spacefarers," unquote. This is exactly the model that all of us would like to see flourishing, and now a demonstrated model is on the table for all of us to follow and further improve upon. Australia, though had not taken a major plunge into space activities long back, they were very proactive in putting in place a facilitating mechanism to engage in space activities through the Space Activities Act more than 2 decades back. Many companies and agencies have taken advantage of those and have created small centers of excellence in niche areas in Australia. With the increased global focus on space in recent times, Government of Australia was quick in responding by formally creating the Australian Space Agency in 2018 and also creating the required ecosystem for private industry to actively contribute in this sector. Creation of the Space Infrastructure Fund and also the space investments to encourage American business, Australian businessmen and researchers' participation in foreign planetary missions are excellent initiatives. We, on the other hand, took a major plunge into space, primarily seeing the huge potential it had in addressing severe socio-economic issues facing the nation, and were quite successful in addressing them. In that process, we missed to address the facilitating mechanism and have currently, during the past 5 years, woken up to this reality and are vigorously pursuing the same. The recent announcements are in this direction and address most of the issues. If I may take note of statements issued by the Department of Space, the Space Act and other policy guidelines will quickly follow. I represent the company New Space India Limited, in short called as NSIL, a government-owned company under the Department of Space with the mandate of commercial exploitation of ISRO's capabilities. As part of the recent announcements, our mandate has been significantly broadened to take over and operate all identified operational systems, including launch vehicles, satellites, and services from ISRO. The highly talented and skilled human resources and high-end infrastructure available with ISRO will be able to concentrate on niche areas and cutting-edge research and development of new and futuristic systems and missions. The government, on the other hand, has also created a facilitating mechanism for the private players by creating an independent regulator cum facilitator in the form of InSpace. As I understand, InSpace has been given all-encompassing authority to address whatever is required, even in the absence of a formal Space Act or other policies. The government has further thrown open the unique and capital-intensive infrastructure available with ISRO at very much affordable rates to these private players to pursue their activities. This will cater to the segment which the Space Infrastructure Fund initiative of Australian government does. Preliminary indications from the industry indicate their willingness to raise resources on their own for the program, even though there had been call for economic backing from few quarters. So hence, this may not be a case for there may not be a case for specific financial stimulus. From this, we can understand that both our nations are proceeding in the same direction and with same goals. While this being the ground reality, there is no stopping of our companies working together to mutual benefits. Space is an area where no geographical boundaries play a role, and so had been space activities on the ground also, even though certain restrictions were and continue to be in place, considering the dual nature of some of the key technologies. However, this has not hampered, even in the Cold War days, collaborations, joint working, and sharing of capabilities in the development of space activities for peaceful users. In my assessment, companies participating in today's panel will find companies in the other country working on exactly similar areas of or other areas of common interest, and the deliberations will definitely help them come together. As far as our cooperation is concerned, the Honorable High Commissioner has already highlighted Australia had been highly supportive of the Indian program and had extended all possible support for our Earth observation missions and the regional navigation programs. I also understand that active discussions are on for the forthcoming human spaceflight missions too. On the commercial front, we had the Australia's Century 1 satellite on board our PSLV a couple of years ago. A gem as far as space is concerned and located in Australia is the WASA, the Western Australian Specialty Alloys, manufacturers of special alloys including nickel alloys. There is huge yet unexplored potential for such companies in India. However, there are several reputed Australian trading firms supplying aerospace grade materials to various Indian programs. I hope today's deliberations will bring more and more such opportunities to the fore, and we will have great space commerce between our two countries in the days to come. I wish the deliberations all success. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for those comments, Mr. Narayanan. It's great to see the mutual commitment to strengthening ties and improving collaboration in space. So thank you very much. It's appreciated. We'll now move to the main session. Our panellists represent a stellar mix of government and industry leaders across the various segments of the space sector and across Australian states. Today, we'll highlight the diversity across the Australian space ecosystem, covering rockets, launch sites, satellite data applications, situational awareness, and much more. But let's start with the policy and regulatory lead from the Australian Government, our newly created Australian Space Agency. The agency is essentially the front door for Australia's international engagement on civil space. I'd like to call on Ms. Caitlin Caruana, Assistant Manager for International Engagement at the agency. She'll provide an overview of Australia's space sector, the role the agency plays in supporting international engagement, priority areas for collaboration under the Australian Civil Space Strategy, and recent initiatives, including our partnership with NASA. Caitlin, over to you.
Great, thank you. Just checking everyone can hear me. Excellent. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's a real pleasure to be here with my esteemed colleagues from across Australia and India. I think in these really unusual times, it's an even more lovely opportunity for us all to get together and have these discussions, and I look forward to the day where we can all do this again in person. So I'm here today on behalf of Australia's Space Agency, and while Australia is new to having a space agency, we are by no means new to space. We were famously involved in the Apollo 11 communications with the first pictures of Neil Armstrong's boot on the moon being broadcast from Australia, and we have over 50 years of treaty engagement with NASA. But we're now entering this new and dynamic civil space age. So we created a space agency to transform and grow a globally respected space industry that lifts the broader economy and not only inspires Australians, but improves their lives as well. The Space Agency is looking to triple the size of Australia's space economy to $12 billion and create 20,000 new jobs by 2030. There has been significant government investment to support this, $700 million to the space economy since our inception in 2018, largely through the likes of our research institutions like Geoscience Australia and our primary research body, the CSIRO. The agency's civil space strategy outlines 4 pillars through which we will achieve our growth and transformation. These are firstly our international pillar. In this modern space age, we can't go it alone, and the agency is the front door for partnerships and for civil space activities. Then we have our national pillar, through which we're looking to build domestic capabilities through coordination and through investing in enabling or shared infrastructure. We then have our responsible pillar. The agency is the primary regulator for space activities in Australia. We're focused on safety and security, balanced with fostering innovation. And then finally, we have our inspiration piece. We are extremely lucky to work in an industry that captures the minds of so many, and we need to harness this and inspire a future workforce that is diverse and capable of feats that we haven't even thought about yet. Under these pillars, the Space Agency's activities are guided by our 7 civil space priority areas. These are position, navigation and timing, Earth observations, communications technology and services, space situational awareness and debris monitoring, leapfrog R&D, robotics and automation, and access to space, which is our launch piece. In the interest of time today, I'm going to largely focus on our international piece, but I'd be more than happy to provide any further detail or answer any other questions you may have on the other pillars or on our civil space priority areas. So as an agency, we recognise that we need to open doors internationally so that we can all access opportunities. We are working extremely closely with other national space agencies. Since our inception in July 2018, we have signed 10 international arrangements with the likes of JAXA, CANES, DLR, the UK, Canada, and we've actually had an MOU arrangement with ISRO covering space since 2012. We're also continuing to support international missions with the US, Japan, and with ISRO on the Gaganyaan mission, where we are working to station tracking facilities in Australia's external territories to track ISRO's ambitious program of human spaceflight. We're extremely excited for this collaboration opportunity. We wish ISRO every success as they look to become only the 4th country to put humans in space. We've also invested $150 million over 5 years to support Australian businesses and researchers to work on our Moon to Mars initiative in conjunction with NASA's Artemis mission. The Moon to Mars initiative is focused on bringing together Australia's unique capabilities to accelerate the growth of the national civil space industry so that we can significantly contribute to international space exploration. We see huge opportunities for Australia's industries here, particularly from areas such as space, manufacturing, resources, energy, defence and health. This program includes $47 million for a supply chain program, which we've just announced, to get Australian products and services into national and international supply chains, $45 million for a demonstrator program and for pilot projects for Australian industry and researchers, and $50 million for a Trailblazer program, which will be a major project supporting NASA's activities related to their moon and onto Mars. We see the opportunities for Australia in leveraging our existing capabilities in many areas and in leveraging our track record as a trusted partner, particularly with countries such as India, where we've long been working together in a number of areas. If you take mining, for instance, Australia has one of the strongest and most innovative mining economies in the world. Our mining industry is well versed in remotely managing their operations. This has huge potential for applications in space, for remote asset management. Being able to service or build infrastructure from far away is an extremely exciting opportunity. Our health industry is also extremely familiar with managing in remote environments, not just in the Australian outback, but also through our presence in Antarctica, where we've studied human interaction in remote environments. This also has huge applicability to space as we become capable of longer and longer missions. Australia is also a world leader in Earth observations through initiatives such as Geoscience Australia's Digital Earth Australia platform. This is a platform that analyses large amounts of spatial and image-based Earth observation data and synthesises that into products and information that can be used by government and industry. Again, this is something that has huge potential in areas such as agricultural monitoring, water management, and in emergency response management. Where we see opportunities for partnerships is in these areas, finding partners with similar priorities in their national space strategies and establishing work programs that benefit both economies. This will be extremely important as many economies look to recover from the current pandemic situation. Through establishing these partnerships, we see huge potential for partnerships, not just between the Australian Space Agency and ISRO, where we're primarily focused on government-to-government engagement, but also between Australian and Indian companies. The Australian Space Agency's role is to open these international doors and support the domestic environment under which these international partnerships can thrive. There's always more to be done. We're an extremely young agency, but we have a strong track record of delivering in our small time frame, and we have a strong history of being a partner of choice for many countries in this field. So thank you so much for being here today. I'm really looking forward to the discussions, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any additional questions for the Australian Space Agency.
Thank you very much, Caitlin, for that comprehensive overview. And it's quite remarkable what you've achieved in only 2 years of operation, so congratulations. Another important government department is the Australia's Trade and Investment Commission. Austrade are experts in connecting Australian businesses with the world, helping Australian firms realise their global ambitions, opening doors, unlocking opportunities, promoting our sectoral expertise and attracting investment into Australia. I'd like to welcome Daniel O'Toole. He is a Senior Advisor at Austrade and a secondee to the Australian Space Agency. He'll talk about how Austrade supports industry engagement in the space sector, highlighting priority areas for investment and recent projects. Daniel, over to you.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, esteemed guests and colleagues. So as Michael said, my name is Daniel O'Toole. I work for the Australian Trade and Investment Commission, also known as Austrade. Austrade is the leading trade investment agency for the country and also act as the point of contact for international investors. We have over 1,100 people working across 117 offices around the world, 79 of which are international in 48 different markets. My specific role is just on the space sector, and as noted, I work quite closely with the Space Agency on all trade and investment matters related to space. So I'm going to kind of split this up just a little bit into some points about why we think Australia is a good investment option, and also some of the trends we've been seeing in India. So just briefly on why Australia. Australia is an economy that has seen very strong growth over the past 3 decades at 3.2% a year. Australian GDP growth since 1992 has outmatched most comparable economies, including the Euro area at 1.6%, the UK at 2.1%, and the US at 2.6%. This growth is underpinned by quite a significant amount of resilience within the economy, and it's quite diversified, with 82% around the country's goods and services, 18% in value-added areas, and also 15% in technology-driven sectors. Trade investment is quite a critical pillar of the economy's resilience. In 2018 to 2019, our two-way trade investment in goods and services totaled $892 billion, making up approximately 46% of nominal GDP. 12 of Australia's 15 largest markets are in Asia or Oceania, with a total value of around $577 billion, accounting for 2/3 of our total two-way trade. Investment is particularly critical. We host approximately $3.9 trillion worth of foreign investment, which includes both foreign direct investment and portfolio investment. Since 2000, foreign direct investment has risen by 8.4% a year, while other investment has risen slightly faster at 8.6%. As a percentage of GDP, Australia's total value of foreign investment stock has reached 196% in December 2019, up from just 120% in 2000. We're very strong in research and development, and this ties quite neatly into space. We have strong expenditure as a percentage of our GDP, and a high proportion of available researchers. Australia is amongst the most innovative countries in the world, alongside the US and France. In 20 out of 22 fields of academic research, our research publications achieve an impact that is at least 20% above the global average. Our top 10 strongest categories of published research include, importantly, space sciences, physics, computer science, clinical medicine, multidisciplinary engineering, molecular biology and genetics, material science, environment, ecology, and plant animal sciences. We're a highly globalized economy. When considering a range of economic, social, and political factors, Australia is one of the most globalized countries in the world, and according to some measures, Australia is ranked at number 2 in the Asia Pacific region, just after Singapore. We also have a very high digital quality of life according to the Surfshark 2019 Digital Quality of Life ranking. We ranked first out of 65 countries, followed by France and Singapore. Factors contributing to the nation's prime spot include strong data protection laws, high content availability and affordable mobile internet, fast mobile internet speed, well-developed e-government systems, and strong cybersecurity. A few points on Australia's space sector. In 2019, the space sector in Australia, the space industry activity as a whole, was valued at about $4.8 billion in revenue, of which roughly 719 organisations were involved. Downstream applications accounted for around 3.8 billion of this, with telecommunications and television networks dominating significantly. Nevertheless, there's also a growing and vibrant space, small to medium enterprise and startup sector that is offering both a number of upstream and downstream solutions for space in Australia. The distinctive solutions offered by these companies often take advantage of Australia's unique geography, skills, or solves problems other industries encounter in seeking to manage our sparse and complex geography. You'll hear from some of these companies today, but some of the areas of note include satellite communications, Earth observation, IoT, space situational awareness, robotics, propulsion technologies, as well as CubeSat platforms and spaceport projects that are being developed in the country as well. We've also seen increased interest from a foreign investment standpoint in Australia in space. This has been mirrored by the number of statements of strategic intent that the space agency has been signing with major global space primes. From our sort of empirical data, we've noted that this is particularly strong around ground stations for supporting communications technologies and space situational awareness, satellite development and manufacturing, and launch systems and spaceports. Examples of this include announcements such as Situational, based in Italy, and Tyvek from the United States, announcing that they will establish operations in Australia. Situational and Tyvek have already done that now. One last point here, sorry, it's my writing. The large scale customers for Australia in the space sector have been largely telecommunications companies and defence. They're the key customers that are driving investment. They both have quite different needs and priorities, but they are responsible for the biggest projects. So we can speak a little bit about them later on, but defence in particular has some large space projects that they're undertaking. That probably sums it up from me.
Thanks very much for that, Daniel. And we might come back to you with if we can hear some more case studies of companies you've supported. So we'll if there's time in the Q&A session. I'd now like to take you to Queensland, the Sunshine State. In February this year, the Queensland Government introduced a 5-year space industry strategy, looking to position the state as a leader in launch activities, ground systems, Earth observation, niche manufacturing, robotics, and automation for space. A company that strives to provide low-cost access to space and enable human spaceflight and exploration is Gilmore Space Technologies. The company's hybrid propulsion system promises to reduce the cost to launch and lower the risks. Today, we have Gilmore Space Technologies CEO, Mr. Adam Gilmore. He's a lifelong space fan and believes that rockets can be made smaller, cheaper, faster, and that the new space industry would benefit greatly from having more dedicated access to space. I'd like to invite Adam to speak about the latest industry trends that he's seeing in the sector in Australia and globally, particularly the demand that he's seeing for rockets that his company produces and where he sees opportunities to partner with India. Adam, over to you.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, so my company is developing an orbital launch vehicle. Our main propulsion technology is hybrid rocket engines. We started working on hybrid rockets in 2014. We've tested over 100 different engines with thrusts up to 82 kilonewtons, and we're hoping our first launch vehicle goes into orbit in 2022, and so far we're on track for that, which is great. I think the biggest trend that we're still continuing to see is miniaturization of space is making satellites a lot smaller and more powerful than they used to be. The customers that we're talking to are all over the world. They're looking at very innovative technologies, and it's everything from different ways of looking at the Earth to different ways of communicating with the Earth. Probably the number one biggest trend we're seeing is broadband internet from space. There's 3 to 4 very large companies and probably another 10 smaller ones that are looking at putting up tens of thousands of small satellites in the next 5 years. So that's a big opportunity for us in terms of resupply. We've done some research work with NASA. We have a Space Act agreement with NASA that we got in 2018. We can work with them across a number of different technologies, but the first one that they're interested in was we made a prototype of a water extraction rover that we're supposed to test on a Mars analog that they have at the Kennedy Space Station. And we want to hopefully do that by the end of next year, which will be really cool. I've been looking at space for a long, long time, and I've definitely been watching the Indian space market. And I'm not Indian, but I'm very proud of what you guys have been doing. I have a lot of friends in India. I think what I aspire to in my company is, as Michael said, do things vastly cheaper than they were done before. And India really sets the standard on the global scale for what they can do for very, very cheap, what I call really cool missions, like missions to Mars. So what I would really love to do with India in the next 5 or so years is work on what we call cool missions. And that would be missions either to areas around the moon or to near-Earth orbit asteroids. I think that's a big opportunity. Some countries have gone there. We'd definitely like to go and explore some of these asteroids, and it'd be fantastic if we could partner with some of the companies in India to do that. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much for that, Adam. It's great to be speaking to Australia's very own rocket man, so appreciate the insights. We'll now move to South Australia, where the Australian Space Agency is based. Sorry, if you could just mute if you're not speaking at the moment. There's a bit of feedback. So South Australia is already home to about 80 space-related operations. The state government has also invested heavily in the sector, creating the South Australian Space Industry Centre to drive space innovation, research and entrepreneurial development. We actually have the director of that centre here today, Ms. Tiffany Kachma. Tiffany, you'll provide an overview of South Australia's capabilities and focus areas, the state government support available to space entrepreneurs and startups, including those from overseas, and what technology, R&D and services that South Australian-based companies can provide Indian partners. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Michael. Just so fantastic to be joining you today. We obviously watch India's work with great interest, and it's great to see the ecosystem there developing, and all the news and movements and developments that are happening there. So it's just great to learn more today. And I would like to say thank you to Mr. Narayan too for his very kind comments about our launch activity that we had on the weekend with our 2 suborbital launches. Launch is not easy, and it was just great to have that first foray into that. And of course, and also the High Commissioner mentioned that ISRO launched one of our South Australian satellites from a company called Fleet Space not that long ago, which was a fantastic achievement as well. So certainly great opportunities for collaboration between the 2 nations. Thank you. You've mentioned a little bit about South Australia. And I think there are a lot of commonalities in terms of our approach to really enabling local industry, helping industry in South Australia to really increase their technical readiness and their ability to access both commercial and defence opportunities. So we certainly work closely with industry, and similarly, South Australia actually, I think in Australia, had the first space growth strategy for our region in Australia. and our capital city in Adelaide. So we had a space growth strategy back in 2016, and of course a big missing piece of the puzzle was having an Australian space agency. So of course when that happened, that was wonderful for the country, and we now work very closely with the space agency, which is wonderful. Just a little bit about South Australia. One of our key points of interest, as Michael mentioned, we have over 80 organisations and research and industry and academia. And a lot of our activity in South Australia is centred around a new innovation precinct in our CBD called Lot 14. So Lot 14, was certainly, if anyone, when you're able to travel, we would always welcome people to come and visit, and visit especially Lot 14. Lot 14 is home to the Australian Space Agency, the Smart Satellite Cooperative Research Centre, which is the headquarters of a federal $245 million research project, which is a 7-year program around advanced satellite systems, advanced communications, and advanced Earth observation. So that's great to have that headquartered here, but also activity all around Australia. Lot 14 is also the home to the Australian Institute of Machine Learning, which constantly sort of ranks in the top 3 around the world for machine vision and robotic vision, which is amazing. There's also the Australian Cyber Collaboration Centre at Lot 14, and also the first Australian MIT Big Data Living Lab. So we're really working hard to bring together defence, space, cyber, AI, and mixed into that immersive technologies and around the creative industries as well, because they can all add value with the technologies that they develop. The other thing I guess I should mention about South Australia is we're very much home to many defence projects. We have about $90 billion worth of defence projects being undertaken in South Australia, and we have a really large presence of the Defence Science and Technology Group, especially around the defence space capability piece. So it's a really, really exciting place to be. In terms of, Michael wanted me to touch on what sort of support we offer. So we have a few different programs, and certainly we look very much in an outward fashion, because we need these relationships and international partnerships to do what we want to do. No one in space does everything, so we need to partner, and we as Caitlin said, we want to encourage these leapfrog technologies to evolve. So we have a landing pad program, which is very successful, which allows companies just easily to come and put a couple of people on the ground, when they want to be considering activities in Australia. So they may be looking to expand into Australia or a presence in Asia Pac. So a landing pad program is very popular. And on the space front, we do have a fantastic incubator program, which Natish is probably going to mention, from Astrogate Labs, who participated, which was fantastic, and what a wonderful example of an Indian startup company. And we have a venture capital fund, and we have other funds that are supportive around research and commercialisation. And we have great initiatives like the International Space University does their Southern Hemisphere Space Studies program here with our University of South Australia. So, like, really exciting things to do. And Lot 14, as the home of the Space Agency, is just a place where people come together, and you can really easily sort of embed into Australia through that program. Local capabilities we've touched a little bit on, certainly small satellites and subsystems. A lot of work around artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the data analytics piece. Some great ground segment credentials here in South Australia. Defence innovation is a priority. Space-enabled services, we've talked about fleet. We also have Myriota, which is attracting great investment from, including from Boeing Horizon X, the first time that they've invested outside of the US. And launch, of course. So we have a big focus on launch activity, both suborbital and orbital. So we have a major project going through the process at the moment for an orbital launch facility, and we have some Indian companies interested in that facility. They're obviously companies that are looking at numerous launch sites, numerous options to service their customers the best way they can. And we're thrilled to have partnerships like that, and we see that as a very reciprocal opportunity. So I think that probably gives you a little bit of a summary.
That's a great overview, Tiffany, so thanks for that. And I'm glad you mentioned the landing pad and the incubation programs, as well as Astrogate Labs. So we have the co-founder of that company here with us today, Mr. Nitish Singh, and he actually commenced that program late last year at the University of South Australia's Innovation and Collaboration Centre. So Astrogate Labs builds free space optical communication terminals for small satellites. And as everyone seemed to mention, there is a boom in the small sat industry at the moment, given the growing demand for telecommunications, broadband, and so on. We'd love to hear more from you, Nitish, about Astrogate, what your current plans are, and your experience being incubated in Australia, what you did on the program, and if it helps you integrate into Australia's space ecosystem. Over to you, Nitish.
Thanks a lot, Michael, for that introduction. First of all, I'd like to extend my thanks to the delegates, Australia High Commission, Confederation of Indian Industry, ANSIL, and our co-panelist. It's a fantastic opportunity to be a part of this panel, and I look forward to a great interaction down the line. So the Astrogate Labs, I'm co-founder and CEO of Astrogate Labs. We started the company in fall 2017, where the idea was to now, as we're seeing a boom in the small satellite one space, where satellites are now becoming the size of a shoebox to a backpack even. And the rate of data transmission, the data storage is increasing over tenfold. We're looking at Earth observation satellites generating over 50 gigabytes to 100 gigabytes of satellite data per day, and that's where the opportunity or we took at Astrogate Labs to develop next generation laser communication optical comm solutions. We started developing the core technology early on. One of the key things, as you know, specifically on optical communication solution, is you have to get your pointing and systems very correct. So that's what we started with early on. As our core strategy, we are offering both the satellite terminals as well as a ground station, and then wrapping up it into a downlink services over laser comm. And as part of this activity, we obviously want to have a global ground station network that we plan to build later in 2020. And for that angle, we were looking at many collaboration opportunities overseas where we can set up small aperture optical ground terminal, even starting with an experimental ground terminal early on. We came to know about the Australia Venture Catalyst Space Program. I think that's one of the great programs where both commercialization of the space technology and mentorship and all that are done. Extending this further, I think right now the opportunity for industry collaboration between India and Australia is a very opportune time to do that with the setup of in-space promotion and authorization center, the Australian space agencies. I mean, both the countries have good heritage on space technology, and there are good collaborations going on between government. But now I think the industry can provide a framework for industries also to collaborate. We started early on with the Venture Catalyst Space Program that was last year. In fact, that lays the foundation for us to collaborate with universities in Australia to set up our first optical ground terminal that we are going to do later this year, depending upon how the COVID situation opens up. That's about. We were also got to connect with industries. In fact, over the 4 months period roughly that we were there, we have almost talked to everyone who is building the advanced communication, optical communication solutions. Tiffany spoke about the Smart Satellite Cooperative Research Center. That's one of the industries where we have seen that clear outline and roadmap for key technologies in advanced communication Earth observations are there. And as we were building the technology from India, that fits our role very clearly. And Australia as a location is very ideally suited for low light pollution and all to set up a ground terminal to support right now the existing commercial Earth observation satellites and the telecommunication satellites out there. but also take it a step further to move into space communication to lunar or even deep space assets. That's where our collaboration has begun. We have developed, recently we have completed the technology development and the product development on our small satellite terminal. We did qualification testing of that. We are on track to fly it on next year, in which we are also seeing collaboration with Australian university, University of Tasmania and University of Western Australia to set up a experimental ground terminal there, which will support our first mission. And hopefully we look for more collaborations down the line between industries, between Australian industry and the Indian industry to set up commercial optical ground station. That's a big thing we are looking for in the collaboration one side. Yeah. Having said that, I think that's basically sums up for me, and I look forward to having a great discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much for that, Nitish. And it's great to know that by going through the program, you were able to get a ready network of contacts in industry, at institutions and government as well. So a few lessons there for other startups looking to engage the market in Australia. We'll now move to New South Wales, a state with opportunities in space systems, launch and support services, space-enabled applications, R&D and education and training. Today we have the CEO of High Earth Orbit Robotics, Dr. William Crowe, who heads a company that provides space situational awareness and asteroid prospecting services using camera-equipped satellites. Will, grateful if you can talk us through your technology platform, how you can provide health checks on satellites, and the application for this with Indian partners. Over to you, Will.
Michael, really appreciate that. Please let me know if my microphone's playing up. Thank you. Yeah, so we have quite an affinity with India in our company, as I'm sure a lot of the other companies speaking today too. So earlier this year, I was at the Australian Indian Youth Dialogue, where 20 people from Australia came to India to speak with 20 Indian young leaders. That was held in Delhi and Chennai earlier this year, which was fantastic, just before Mr. O'Farrell came to his post. And we had a fantastic time, had a great dialogue. We also are very good friends with other private space companies in India who are very happy with the way that the Indian government's going in enabling that industry. So people like SatSearch and Pixel Space are good friends of ours, and we're looking to collaborate then as time goes on. In terms of the products that we serve, so we actually use cameras on satellites to get close to other satellites and get high definition images of those satellites. And the reason that that's important is, or there's a couple of reasons actually. So I see one of the comments in the chat here is talking about a disruption of communications on orbit by potentially a Chinese satellite. So a great way to really understand what's happening is to take an image of that satellite. And that's kind of the service we provide to defense and to other industry as well. So really trying to characterize these objects in space is the name of the game. That can be part of space situational awareness, which is largely interesting to government and defense clients, but also supply health data to satellite operators, so their satellite doesn't become part of the space debris problem. So we see heaps of problems happening in space. Both Australian and Indian satellites have experienced these issues. And they include terrible statistics such as 20% of all satellites that are launched today aren't even identified by their owners. And we help with that by just coming past with another satellite and taking an image. So we're really early in our journey so far. We've got a pilot program at the moment, the first of its kind in the world. And we're using generally Earth observation satellites from partners around the world. We have around 10 satellites that we have access to and planning for 10 more over the coming year. And we use these satellites. These satellites are purely used for Earth observation, but our software essentially turns them into space situational awareness satellites, which are used when they're over the ocean. So we increase the value of these satellites and we use them to take images to do what we do. Now we've reached out to Antrix, who have some really interesting hardware in space, including the Cartosat series. We'd love to use these satellites. We do find it a little bit difficult to interact with Antrix and other Indian organizations. And from what I've heard, this isn't just us. This is reasonably common. So we're looking to the government to make it easier for companies like us to work with Antrix and other organizations, and really allow India to become a powerhouse of space situational awareness data and other data types as well, just like our other partners are becoming in other areas of Asia. Really appreciate your time. Really looking forward to the conversation after this. And Michael, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks very much for that, Will. Great to see the work that you're looking to do, and there seems to be a lot of areas that would be useful for some of the Indian partners here. And the reason for this dialogue is really to open up the dialogue and to talk about what opportunities there are and how we can take some of those forward. So thanks for raising that, and also for answering one of the questions that's coming up on the chat function. So please continue to use that function. To the panellists remaining, if there's anything that comes up that you want to include in your remarks, please feel free to do so. Now we'll go to Victoria, a state with strong capabilities in data, cybersecurity, advanced manufacturing, R&D and engineering. It's also home to around 250 businesses and organisations in the space and space-enabled industries. Dr. Zafar Mohammed Gauss is the Executive Director from Spatial Vision, a company redefining what's possible in geospatial and information technology, especially satellite data and imagery. Zafar, I think the audience would be interested to hear about the various applications for satellite data across a range of industries, from agriculture to fisheries, mining and disaster management. And can you also talk about Australia's expertise in the field, including our world-leading data policy, as well as opportunities for collaboration with India? And I know you spent a bit of time at Anna University, which is a state node for ISRO, so it'd be good to draw on that experience as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, good day to my Australian colleagues, and namaste to our Indian friends. It's a great pleasure to join you all through this collaboration here. I'm quite unique because 50% of my life I spent in India at Anna University working for the Space Applications Center node, and then the 50% of the life over here in Victoria, and then other parts of New South Wales and ACT to work in the geospatial sector. Quite unique in this regard is understanding both cultures, and also had been instrumental for some Indian satellite data to be downloaded at ACRS, then at Geosense Australia in the past. So I would draw upon both countries' experience and collaboration, and our view is that Australia can offer its experience, especially working with the industry in terms of policy. When the Honorable Prime Minister of India had announced the program about privatization, and also the policy talks about geospatial and space. So that's where I will bring the dialogue in that particular angle. In Australia, the SmartSat CRC, with the leadership Dr. Peter Woodgate had set up a Space plus Spatial 2030 agenda, bringing space and spatial sector together in Australia to identify the roadmap. It's represented by the Australian Space Agency. Anthony Murfitt is part of that committee. I represent the SSSI, the Civil Spatial Sciences Institute, in that committee, Defence. But also the spatial industry and space business associations are part of it. So this is quite unique that not only academia, the industry bodies, the government, including defense, is part of this roadmap 2030 agenda that will build what we all have to collectively offer in this particular space. Our colleague Caitlin had mentioned Digital Earth Australia initiative. again, a government initiative, an investment around 30 years of Landsat repository. But then government makes available that information, and private sector like us build apps that could reach farmers or fisheries, where we are able to draw upon this complex data sets and apply our services to reach the farmers. As I mentioned in one of the talks, the Australian farming or grazing lands are quite huge. It takes about 5 to 6 hours from reach from one end to other. This is where the applications of satellite, irrespective of resolutions, are very useful for the agriculture sector. The other day also had mentioned about the positioning technologies that are available. Once again, the obligation of the government to provide 5 to 7 centimeter accuracy information to the civilian purpose, then farmers are able to use that into precision agriculture. Remote mining was mentioned. I'm also involved with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, helping developing their national national mining strategy and development of a national geodatabase and geological database. And that helps the Australian experience to come across what sort of ready data that needs to be available for the industries or the mining explorers. And Australia's unique experience in mining and data management, combined with the utilization of space data, helps the explorers to narrow down their exploration. So these are the sort of the multilateral collaboration. Private sector companies such as us are able to work along with the government, able to use geospatial technology, which is the end of the supply chain of space, taking the Earth observation program and converting them using applications or apps on mobiles in order for common man to benefit this utilization. I think with India's track record on making solutions cheaper, economic scale, and also a very learned market and software development entities available as the export market in India, with the design thinking from Australia, both sectors can come along, or both countries can bring their talent pool in order to make the Asia Pacific market a body of knowledge and an export economy, especially, so that we both can take advantage of it. Because I particularly harness around this export economy because our institutions, especially with the universities, we have those relationships. But once again, I'm an alumni and I've served Anna University. I'm still related with Anna University in some of the skills, where in 1997, under Dr. Abdul Kalam, the former president of India, who was an alumni of Anna University and also professor societal transformation after his presidency, was able to develop a payload at university where with Cube satellites, and this is, I'm talking about 2001, 2002, during that sort of period where before his presidency, when he was a societal transformation professor, university students designed payloads for telemedicine and education, where rural India people were able to take advantage, and ISRO's launch vehicles allowed those payloads to be put in the satellite, in the space. So we could take advantage of those sort of payload designs to the Australian end with the universities over here to benefit. And I think the last point I'd like to offer here is, here in Australia, the private sector and the government work along together to develop very good strategic policies and roadmap. This is something that we can offer to India with the government as well as the industries, so that we can bring a marketplace that can thrive based upon the unique skills both countries have to offer. Thank you very much, Michael.
And thank you very much, Zafar. That's some great insights into the applications of geospatial data, but also how Australia and India can work together, particularly on some of our more strategic objectives. So thanks very much. We'll now move to our final panellist, Ms. Carly Scott, CEO of Equatorial Launch Australia which is based in the Northern Territory. Sorry, Carly, there's a bit of feedback. Can I just put you back on mute for a moment? Carly leads the team developing Australia's first commercial spaceport, launching and recovering spacecraft and payloads. The Northern Territory is particularly suited for launch sites due to its proximity to the equator, tectonic stability, low population, and vicinity to the sea. Carly will talk through the work that she's doing with NASA, what her company offers an Indian partner, the launch capability available across Australia, and her work to encourage more women to take up STEM. Carly, over to you.
Thanks very much. It's really exciting to join the conversation with India's space industry. As you said, Equatorial Launch Australia is developing a commercial spaceport to launch and recover items flown through space. Now, that's at about 12 degrees from the equator in the top end of Australia. We're able to facilitate all orbits, all proven technologies, and we provide a really good range over both land and sea for recovery. Now, we've worked with traditional owners, venture capitalists to build us to the point that we're at, and have been successful in securing a NASA contract to launch 3 of their suborbital rockets from our site next year, which is really exciting news. Now, those rockets will undertake atmospheric research programs, really looking at exoplanet stars and undertaking cutting-edge research, which demonstrates Australia's capability in working with international partners to deliver really meaningful scientific space and engineering programs. Now, that launch itself will probably reach about 250 kilometres in altitude. We have the capacity there to lift about 300 or over 300 kilograms into space. And we also will see in the next month or so the pouring of that NASA pad, which is a significant asset in Australia that will be available to other companies. So Indian companies, for example, can come to Australia now and use a NASA quality pad by the end of the year. So that gives us an orbital quality site by the end of this year, which is really exciting. Now, the part here that we wanted to talk about was also that there's a really exciting opportunity to work with Australia through launch. Australia is a strong trading partner, a very keen ally of India. And there are complementary sites throughout Australia. We're not the only site that is looking to provide launch opportunities and the facilitation of access to space. So Australia is a place for launch and launch partnerships with an estimated $2 billion worth of launch activity over the coming 5-10 years. We can talk to sites like Woomera that was established in 1957, and it's a government and defence focus for that site there. So they haven't launched satellites since the 1970s, but a fantastic asset down in South Australia. We also have balloon launch from Alice Springs in the Northern Territory, discussion around parabolic flight opportunities from Australia. You heard from South Australia with a really exciting demonstration of launch there recently. South Australia's offer does not have equatorial LEO or GEO, but does provide really strong polar sun sink options, and it's a very exciting development in Australia. We're also talking about the potential to launch from the east coast of Australia, which is yet to be assessed, but a very exciting option. And with regard to the site in the Northern Territory with Equatorial Launch Australia, we've touched on that already. All orbits are possible. We are seeing discussion around LEO, and the discussion also includes some of the ongoing asset risk for sun sink orbits. Now, when you get close to the poles with your assets, there is a risk of collision that will continue to increase. It is still a very exciting opportunity to do those launches from anywhere in the world, including Australia. But the opportunity to have an equatorial launch probably is a good complement to sun sink opportunities as well. Now, from the NT site in Australia, you also have 2 direct lunar insertions per day. So that's a great efficiency in the launch that's there. The environmental approvals are in place. We have over 3 pads that you can access at the site, and a lot of room to continue growing into as Indian companies and partners continue to look for growth opportunities. So it's a low-risk site, and the other component with developing in Northern Australia is the opportunity to make use of some of those government programs that some of the other presenters have talked about. Now, uniquely, I know that the Indian market is looking to expand and encourage investment in Indian sites as well. One of the opportunities in Australia is to make use of the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility. that talks to a $5 billion fund that allows develop infrastructure in Northern Australia to get some extra support. So I would talk to the fact that Australia has very strong support mechanisms for these partnerships going forward. Now, Michael, you also asked me to touch on the economic and social outcomes for space technology in Australia. I know India is one of the most advanced social economies in Asia. A strong focus on those sustainable development goals as well. And I think when we look to that and we talk about agricultural sustainability and water management, this is really where some of those initiatives around launch and the types of technologies that Australian companies are excelling at can really come to the fore, and where launch sites in Australia can really offer really prioritised and efficient access to space opportunities. And what we're saying there is when you have non-government owned sites, there is an opportunity for your launch to be prioritised and not to be pushed by government launches, which is a really exciting opportunity. Michael, I know you also asked me to have a chat about women in space as well and women in STEM. So hopefully I'm waving the flag somewhat just by speaking here. The work that we do generally is to present and be seen in part and demonstrate that there are so many opportunities for women in the scientific and STEM fields. And it doesn't really matter what background you're from. There are opportunities to come into the space sector and other links and work with Australia really strongly. And Australian companies are poised and ready to do that for a range of groups. And it really shows our focus on supporting diverse communications. And I think it's a strength of Australian industry all round. I'll tail this off, Michael, by looking at what makes Australia a good partner. We've heard from Daniel O'Toole, who talked about the globalised status of our country, the fact that we have good data quality, fast speeds, cybersecurity as a focus, which I notice is in the chat room as well. We certainly have strong programs to support international trade and partnerships to help business work between both nations. I think that prioritised access is one of those things, and those hubs around the nation that look to support space industry growth will really be a huge asset to any business in India that's looking to do business with Australia. It's an exciting time looking at launch in Australia. The fact that we have launch sites available right now means we can give you a prioritised access pathway to space with very efficient launch opportunities and great funding and collaboration programs that can provide a boost to some of those exciting Indian businesses that are looking to work with Australia now. And absolutely, we'd be very happy to talk to any of those businesses that want to access space. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you so much for that, Carly, for those insights. It's quite impressive, given that there's going to be, up to 6,000 satellites launched in the next 5 to 10 years. People and companies will be looking for other areas to be able to launch those payloads. So it's great to see that Australia has opportunities there. And thank you to all our panellists for providing those initial insights. We'll now move to a bit of a moderated discussion. We have about 15 to 16 minutes to be able to answer some of the other questions that remain outstanding and to see if there's anything else remaining in the chat function. There's been a few questions when people registered about travel and visas to Australia during this COVID pandemic. I think it's best answered by our High Commissioner. High Commissioner, when can Indian companies and startups expect to be able to travel to Australia to pursue many of the collaboration opportunities outlined today?
Well, I confess, Michael, to coming prepared on this question, which I think was a no-brainer. Obviously, COVID has caused massive disruption, unprecedented disruption, and of course, that has affected travel probably most of all. But the situation's dynamic and continues to change. To manage the health risks, many countries, including India and Australia, have introduced international travel bans. Australia has also introduced passenger caps to try and maintain the integrity of its hotel quarantine system, which has been critical in certainly the response to the second wave that we're slowly getting over. However, the good news is that the Australian government recently announced a process for non-citizens in critical sectors or with critical skills to apply for travel exemptions. And this includes those delivering services in sectors critical to Australia's economic recovery, where no Australian worker is available, or areas whose entry would otherwise be in Australia's national interest, supported by federal or state authorities. And as we've discussed today, this covers many segments of the space sector, from critical infrastructure, telecommunications, engineering, large-scale manufacturing, and emerging technology. And for full details about this process, you'll need to visit the Home Affairs website, which is easily found and it's easily navigable. In the meantime, we encourage you to continue to do what we've been doing this morning, or this afternoon, which is to engage virtually. And if you need assistance in making connections, please reach out to our diplomatic network across India and the Australian Space Agency. And of course, the network here in India also happily includes Austrade. So no one's pretending it's easy, but there is now a pathway, and I just need more space in the caps to help me with it.
Thanks very much for that, High Commissioner. And we'll be happy to share the link to the website with participants after this session. So we'll do that. One that follows on from that, and probably for Tiffany from the South Australian Space Industry Centre, if startups can't get an exemption to travel to Australia, are Australian institutions offering virtual incubation programs or mentorship programs? Tiffany?
Thank you so much. Yes, look, it's like every other part of business. These things are having to adapt. So we are working with the University of South Australia around the next cohort of the Venture Catalyst Space program, and given the current situation, how we can still progress in an efficient way. So we're working on that at the moment, and we hope that something will be able to come out about that soon.
All right, thanks for that, Tiffany. I have a couple for New Space India Limited from a few Australian companies. So, Mr. Narayanan, these are for you. When can we expect to see further detail of the new space reforms announced earlier this year? And is the new department in space on track to be operational by the end of the year? And a follow-on question is, are Australian companies able to apply directly for ISRO contracts or to use ISRO facilities, or do they require an Indian partner to take advantage of those reforms? Over to you, Mr. Narayanan.
Thank you, Mr. Costa, for that question. It has, I think, more or less the policy that has been announced and what has been planned is fairly well known now with the type of dissemination that has been done by the Department of Space. I don't think there is anything further to be added to that. The second part of the first question, that is when the institution in space will be in place. Yes, as I understand, things are in place, and it will be as announced within the first 6 months, that is by the end of the year or early by the first month of next year, it should be in position. Nevertheless, the activities that are supposed to be handled by the new institution, the InSpace, has already commenced, and a section under the Department of Space is already addressing all the requirements. A contact detail has also been provided in the website, ISRO website, and and as I understand, at least 5-6 discussions with prospective beneficiaries of the new announcements have already requests have come and discussions have happened, and this is an ongoing discussion. So anybody who is interested can just drop in a mail at that link what has been provided, and they will get going with the new reforms in place. Coming to the specific question on Australian companies getting into access to utilize the Indian infrastructure, I am not in a position to comment right now. What has been announced is primarily for the Indian industries and private ventures to get access. Probably once the new institution is in place and things are more clear, those things may get addressed. But as of now, the announcement is primarily for the Indian companies. Hope I have answered to the best of my knowledge, capability. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Narayan. And I think it's important to show that this is an incremental opening up of the private space sector. And so there will be a bit of time before we see the full opening. So thank you for just providing that clarity, which is helpful to many of the Australian companies on the line today. I've got one for the Australian Space Agency. There's been a few questions talking about how the world's greatest minds are sort of looking to space when there's so many challenges here on Earth. I think you touched on some of this, Caitlin, but with health crises such as COVID-19, the climate change emergency, poverty increasing, economies stalling here on Earth, how do we justify the money and the talent that's focusing in space?
Thanks, Michael. I think that's a fantastic question. And I think it's one that we get a lot, even when we're not in a pandemic. I think a really big part of the agency's Inspire piece is making sure that we bring the general public along with us. Everybody knows and recognises things like Apollo 11 as really cool, but now we need to make sure that everybody understands the role that space has in their lives and just how much we're relying on it and how important it is to invest in that. And I think one of my favourite statistics about space is that every single dollar that is spent in space is actually spent here on Earth. It's spent on manufacturing programs. It's spent on training our STEM, our STEM field. And so being able to bring the general public along with that narrative is extremely important. Understanding that everything we do in our day-to-day lives really depends on space. Everything from every time you open your phone and look at the weather app, every time you use your GPS, every time you're watching television, all of that basic day-to-day, all the basic day-to-day things that you're doing, that relies on space, and it really does require a lot of investment. But also more broadly, as we look to things like the pandemic, there could be applications for the pandemic in that we're able to track how human beings are moving around the planet, how they're moving even within countries. So there are huge applications for space, but understanding that is such an important field when there are so many important fields in this modern world that we could be investing in, that understanding that space has a huge role to play in maintaining and improving the quality of our lives, and that it really is worth the investment and the minds that we are putting towards it at the moment.
No, thanks very much. That was quite a challenging one, but a very clear answer as to every dollar that we invest in space is actually on the challenges we face here on Earth. So thanks very much. I've got one for Gilmore Space Technologies, a couple actually. So Adam, how does the cost to make rockets in Australia compare to India? And what is the size range of rockets that are being made in Australia? And added to that, is any Australian companies looking to partner with SpaceX?
Okay, good. Firstly, I think we can be cost competitive with everybody in the world. There's many factors of cost and what makes a rocket costly, and design is a big one, and we're designing a very, very inexpensive vehicle. Having said that, every piece of analysis I do on the launch industry, there's not enough rockets. There's just not enough. There's so many satellites that have to get launched in the next decade to so many different orbits that I think we need between 10 and 20 viable rocket companies all over the world launching once a month. So, whenever I'm raising money with investors, they're never worried about the amount of customers. And there's a lot of things other than cost that people care about as well, but I think we can compete on everything. The size of our initial vehicle, the baby one, will take 300 kilograms to low Earth orbit, and then we're going to have a heavy version that takes 2 tons. We eventually want to create a vehicle that takes around 10 tons when we want to do human space flight, but that's towards the end of the decade. I don't have a lot of details on the other launch companies' rocket sizes, but I think everybody else is focusing on suborbital to begin with. As for SpaceX, we talk to SpaceX all the time. We are talking to them about potentially working on replenishing some of their satellites, but it's very, very early days now. I mean, SpaceX is way ahead of us. Their vehicle is massive. They're going for a totally different market than we are. So they don't look at us as a competitor and we don't look at them as a competitor. So it's all pretty friendly.
Thanks very much for that, Adam. It's some great insights there that might be useful for many of the startups here in India. One for Austrade, I mentioned before, Daniel, can you talk us through some of the companies that you've worked with that have been successful in the space sector?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, so we've worked with a number. So we've run a number of specific activities, events and missions. So we actually held a startup bootcamp activity. So Austrade has international startup landing pads that we have in 5 markets around the world. So one is in Singapore, one is in San Francisco, another is in Berlin, and then we have one in Tel Aviv as well, and Shanghai. That's all 5. So we took a handful of companies in partnership with the New South Wales government to the San Francisco landing pad to help them identify opportunities. That included Will Crow from High Earth Orbit Robotics. So we worked a fair bit with Will Crow and his company. Others who are aggregators of data like Lula, who are a satellite Earth observation platform. And also the space situational awareness companies like Sabre Astronautics, who are one of the leading companies in Australia for SSA based in Sydney. We've also worked with some dual-use technology companies. So in addition to those, we've also worked with EOS Space Systems through largely North America, Middle East and Europe to help them find customers overseas and build opportunities. Tends to be from an export side, a real focus around the applications side of things, and then on the investor side, it's been a little bit more hardware focused. So we've worked with a couple of launch clients as well, but we can't at this stage delve into those. But there's been significant interest there. Happy to speak further if there are further questions about any of those in particular, though.
Thanks very much for that, Daniel. So we've got one about collaboration opportunities in areas of high-performance data analytics. We've had a bit of discussion about satellite data. Can I perhaps go to Will from HEO Robotics, who might be able to provide some insights, and then to Zafar from Spatial Vision. So, Will, given your use of data, do you see any opportunities in high-performance data analytics?
Maybe this will be difficult for you to clarify, Michael, but is it for us to use high-performance data analytics or for us to provide?
I suspect it's to use and provide. Perhaps if you can cover both sides. It might be for the companies here in India that can actually offer those services as well, or would want to partner on specific projects.
Yeah, so we're actually seeing I guess, processing of data become a little bit commodified. So actually a series of Indian companies have reached out to us and companies from all over the world, and it seems like everyone wants to create a, I guess, processing capability. What we're doing at HEO that no one else is doing worldwide is creating the data that you need to create so you can actually perform the analytics over it. So it seems like the analytics performance itself is a little bit commodified, and in fact we can do it in-house very easily. And it seems like the data creation piece is a real hard part and one that we want to collaborate with Indian companies to do, and we're buying data right now wherever we can. So the more we can buy, the happier we are, and we can really provide that increased level of utilization on satellites in space.
Thank you. Zafar?
I think I agree with William. It's more around, I mean, Digital Earth Australia's underpinning success is using the national computer infrastructure at ANUs. That's our supercomputer. Likewise, India has Param and other things from a government perspective. But then you have, private sector providers like Amazon Cloud, who provide high-performing computing services. I think the advantage where we could provide from a perspective is analytics, AI, ML algorithms in order to work across, but also nowadays the ethics policy and AI, ML. I'm a member of World Geospatial Industry Council. Currently, we are doing a global consultation from an Earth observation perspective of responsible use of AI, ML. You would see an announcement from New South Wales government. There is a consultation happening as we speak around the AI strategy of New South Wales government. So these are the things that we can draw upon from industry and government and work with our colleagues in India to bring this cross-sector collaboration. Thanks, Michael.
Perfect. Thanks very much for that, Zafar. Well, we're right on time, so I know there seems to be a lot to talk about, a lot to cover. Please continue to have this engagement offline, continue the conversation, and we'll look for opportunities where we can connect with industry and government as well. Take the opportunity to visit our virtual booth that's still operational until the 10th of October as part of the International Space Conference and Expo. Send us a message directly or leave us your business card. You can also reach out to any of our diplomatic missions in New Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, and of course here in Chennai. And I understand there may be further opportunities to connect at the upcoming International Astronautical Congress next month from the 12th to the 14th of October. We'll be having representatives from the Australian Space Agency as well as from industry who will be attending those virtual sessions. So look, a huge thank you to all of our speakers for giving up your time to help our Indian colleagues understand some of the opportunities in the Australian space sector, and also for us, Australia, to better understand where we can partner in India. We've got a better understanding of Australia's national capabilities, international engagement opportunities across the ecosystem. Thanks also to New Space India Limited for your perspectives on the future of Australia-India collaboration, and also to COI, ISRO and Antrix for your support in organising this event. And then thanks to all the attendees for your valuable questions and insights. Whilst we didn't get to all of them, we've taken a note of them and we'll check through them to make sure that they've been answered through this session. I think we've learned today that the sky is no longer the limit, and there are many areas of complementarity between Australia and India to collaborate on space. We've also heard today how rapidly space technology is developing, and by working together, we can ensure our economies continue to grow, create jobs, we address some of the social issues here, and we can improve the quality of life for our citizens. It's hard to believe that the average smartphone today has almost 100,000 times more power than the computers that led the Apollo mission to the moon all those years ago. So if that's the sort of technology we have with us today, imagine what we can achieve together tomorrow. So I'll leave you with that. Please stay safe and well, and look forward to working with you to take Australia-India collaboration in space to new